having empathy to prevent burnout. Hi, I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz. This is the first day from the fundraising school, and I'm joined today by Dr. Alison Jane Martingano. Alison Jane is a professor at the University of Wisconsin in Green Bay, where she researches and teaches psychology. And she is one of three authors on a new study that looks for an association between empathy and employee burnout. And Alison Jane, what a delight to have you with us on the Fundraising Schools podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is fantastic. I'm so excited to talk about this topic.
And I know the study is of healthcare workers and research of healthcare workers. But as I learned of the study from our mutual colleague, Dr. Sarah Conrath, we both thought that there is information here that transfers to the fundraising profession. And so as we look at this study and learn more about this and how we can apply this to fundraisers, first of all, what is empathy? How did you define empathy? How can people understand empathy as they look at this study?
Yeah, well, starting with the big question there. So empathy is one of those multidimensional constructs that involves more than one thing. So in this particular study, we broke it down into three things. So the common way it's broken down is actually only into two, which is cognitive empathy and effective empathy. But we broke that effective empathy down further into two more. So we ended up with three categories of empathy. So to briefly talk you through them, the first category is cognitive empathy, which is essentially understanding or knowing what someone else is thinking or feeling without necessarily having any emotional response yourself. So we could think of this as sort of empathy with our heads. And as opposed to effective empathy, which is that more empathy with your heart. So this is feeling for somebody else. And so we broke that effective or emotional empathy down into two, one of which was feelings of concern and compassion, which we call empathic concern. And the other is feelings of emotion, contagion, or distress. So that's when you actually mirror what someone else is feeling. So you could feel sad because they feel sad or something like that. So we broke it down into these three different types. And what's super interesting about that is that they relate to burnout in different ways.
We're looking forward to learning more about that. But then let's define burnout. Is this just I'm having a bad day, a bad week, I'm just kind of weary, worn down? But there's something more at play, right? How do we understand burnout?
Yeah, so burnout is a lot more than just feeling a bit weary. It's a syndrome that has to be persistent over a period of time. And it is those feelings of exhaustion, not feeling that you're connected with people at your work. It's usually broken down into multiple facets as well, actually, just like empathy. But to be burnt out, you're probably struggling in multiple domains, not just one domain. And it's really a product of essentially having too much demands on your time, too many stressors at work, and not enough resources to allow you to deal with those stressors.
And the study does use a scientifically accepted measure and understanding of burnout. If you want to know those details, go find the paper. It's not the purpose of this conversation, but again, rigorous researchers taking a look in a helping profession in health services and the connection between burnout and empathy, if any. And so, Alison Jane, what did you and your colleagues find? Is there a relationship between empathy and burnout?
Yes, there is, but not in the way most people expect. So empathy actually prevents or buffers against burnout. Empathic people who are high in that empathic concern that I talked about, or that cognitive empathy, those people are less likely to burn out. And so these are things that we probably actually want to encourage, with the important caveat that third type of empathy I mentioned, the distress, the emotional contagion, if you're predisposed to that kind of empathy, then you are actually more likely to burn out. So what is the relationship between burnout and empathy depends on what type of empathy we're talking about. But most types of empathy do help us and reduce our likelihood of burning out.
And so how do I know if I'm empathic? What are some of the signs I should be watching for? And I know from my conversations with Dr. Conrath, some people have this dispositionally, innately, we're born with this, but it's also something that can be developed. So people can say, I don't have empathy. Well, you can develop this. So what are some of the things I can do that can build my empathy or know that I have empathy that therefore can help me deal with reducing or eliminating possibilities for burnout?
Yeah, absolutely. So empathy is both, as you say, both a state and a trait. So some people are just more predisposed to be empathic. But if you're not, or you worry that you're not enough, you absolutely can train it. And luckily, the most trainable part of empathy is actually that cognitive empathy, which is one of the good types. And this is essentially a skill that gets better with practice. So it's Sarah Conrath loves to describe it as a muscle. It's something that when we practice at it, we try to take other people's perspectives and we work at it. Over time, we get better at it. And so this really is a practice makes perfect sort of situation. Uh, the other thing to keep in mind is if you are the sort of person who tends to have that sort of bad kind of empathy, if we call it that, and you tend to get super distressed and concerned and upset when you see other people suffering, then you may also want to use some strategies to try and actually reduce that. And so there we would recommend typical emotion management strategies that you might do for any kind of stress management, deep breathing, contextualization, and sometimes reframing the situation.
So the empathy that is intellectual of the mind and the empathy that is emotional, that I understand emotionally what the other person is going through, those types of empathy, if I'm understanding you correctly, and to summarize this first part of our conversation, can help ward off burnout. But it's the emotional empathy where I really start carrying the burdens of the other person that can lead me to burnout. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, exactly. It's that tendency to mirror and feel the same level of distress as the other person. So if we imagine a physician when the patient comes in and they're very much in pain and very stressed out, if the physician was to feel those same feelings, that would be problematic. It wouldn't be a helpful emotion to feel. And so that's the sort of empathy that can be not very useful and increase our likelihood of burning out.
One thing we know about professional fundraisers at the fundraising school is they are always others focused. I mean, fundraising is never about the fundraiser. It's about promoting the cause of the nonprofit, the mission, the programs, the services, the outcomes of the nonprofit, the people who participate and benefit from the nonprofit. It's about the donors and their philanthropic motivations. It's about making the community or even the whole world a better place to live. The fundraisers never thinking about themselves. They're always thinking about the other when they're doing their work. So, Alison Jane, in that perspective, how can you help fundraisers make sense of this research to apply in their own work so they can help avoid or reduce burnout?
Yeah, well, actually, I love how you said this focus on the other, because that is actually the sort of types of empathy that make us less likely to burn out. So the emotional empathy that I said that we broke up into the two, the useful one and the problematic one, the difference between those two really is the empathic concern is focused on the other. I am concerned for the other. I am compassionate towards the other. I feel warmth towards the other. Whereas the distress is actually very self-focused, how I feel in reaction to what you're going through. So actually, it's great with people who are involved in philanthropy. They're focused on the other, and it's that focus that's actually going to help them and stay away from that problematic self-focus that we see with empathy sometimes.
So that healthy emotional empathy, again, if I'm understanding you correctly here, is I do know people are in hunger or facing a housing crisis or a medical situation, education, any of the wonderful services that our people fundraise for. And I can feel that pain and understand the difficulties there, but then transfer that to my head and be inspired to go help them, right? Through fundraising. The challenge becomes is if I start carrying that burden that they're going through like a bag of bricks. Is that right?
Yeah. So the critical difference is focusing on feeling for them. So feeling concern or as you say, possibly even positive emotions like inspiration, versus holding that emotion yourself. So if they're distressed, me mirroring that distress and feeling distressed myself. So we want to focus on feeling for them rather than feeling with them.
As I read your excellent paper, I also saw, and maybe you've touched on this already, but explicitly a mention of others focused empathy and self focused empathy. Can you help us understand that distinction, please?
Yeah, so it's up pretty much mirrors onto the sort of bad and good empathies I was sort of as oversimplifying before. So the cognitive empathy and the emotional concern or empathic concern those are the two other focused types of empathy. It's from focused on understanding the other intellectually or feeling for the other emotionally. And the self-focused type of empathy, that would be the distress that we're describing. There is, we haven't talked about it yet because it wasn't included in that paper, also a self-focused version of the cognitive empathy. This would be sort of imagining how I would feel if I were in that situation and focusing again on how I would think and feel rather than how they do. But we didn't cover that one because that's a lot less common.
If I could ask you, Alison Jane, what if that fundraiser has reached the point of burnout, that they weren't aware of what to be watching for and that they've reached that stage? And again, by burnout, we do mean the scientific understanding, the medical understanding of burnout, not just like, oh, I'm sad or I'm a little bit stressed or a little bit weary, but really the depths of what it means medically to be experiencing burnout. Is it too late? Is there anything I can do in the context of empathy to try to get me back into a better place?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's where I want to be really careful about the limits of our research. So our research suggests that empathy can be preventative, but not curative. And so if you've reached that stage of burnout, really the only solutions to that problem are going to be sort of institutional. So you don't have enough resources to be able to cope with the stresses of your job. The solutions are either to reduce the stresses of your job or get more resources to cope. Now, although our research suggests that empathy is one of those resources, we don't want people to think that, oh, the solution to this is I need to care more, I need to do more. If you're suffering from burnout, that's because you've got too much on your plate and not enough to deal with it. I don't think we should put it back on workers, that it's up to them to sort of give the solution.
I can't take the empathy pill, the empathy supplement, the empathy essential oil to feel better.
Not in that sort of curative kind of way. I might suggest taking the empathy pill in small doses as a prevention beforehand. If we do focus on others rather than ourselves, we are less likely to burn out. But there's no evidence, at least in our data, that empathizing would fix burnout once it started.
Alison Jane, this is such a fascinating study that you and your colleagues have brought forward here. And thank you for your patience in explaining the science to the rest of us in ways that we can apply this. You know, I'm also always intrigued that when we research effective fundraising practice, and we also research effective leadership at the fundraising school, certainly the leadership journals and the nonprofit management leadership journals are always predominant. But next on the list is psychology. It is so fascinating that your field is so influential, whether we're talking about donor behavior and donor motivations, and in this case, the well-being in the study, specifically healthcare workers, but that we can also, as a proxy, switch to fundraising professionals. What final advice might you have for fundraisers based on all of your expertise in psychology, including this particular study, to help them stay mentally healthy and well in their important work of fundraising?
Yeah, well, I think the reason that psychology is so relevant is because fundraising is ultimately a human connection. It's a social connection. And so when we're trying to achieve fundraising goals and convince people to become donors or volunteers, we've got to make that social connection. And obviously, I'm a social psychologist, so I'm bound to say that. But I think in this case, the data does support me. And myself and Sarah have started to look into the motivations of especially particularly high net worth donors. And what we find is actually they're surprisingly similar to everyday donors. They care. They have emotions that drive them. They're social animals. They want to give to things that they love and form their identity. And so it really is. It's a human thing, philanthropy, and I think that's why psychology has so much to offer here.
Dr. Alison Jane Martingano. She is a professor and researcher at the University of Wisconsin in Green Bay. And Alison Jane, thank you so much for helping us better understand this very important aspect of human well-being, including in the field of fundraising. Continued success in all of your work.
Thank you so much for having me.
And the research that I mentioned informs our coursework here at the Fundraising School. 27 public courses. They lead to 5 different certificates. We're in person in more than 10 U.S. cities. And of course, online anywhere across the world. We also have custom training. In fact, I recently had a custom training project in Green Bay not all that long ago, right there at Lambeau Field. And our custom training can go anywhere in the United States, around the world, in person, online. We also have our quarterly webinars, these weekly podcasts, and our textbook, which does include a chapter from Dr. Sarah Conrath, our mutual colleague, Achieving Excellence in Fundraising. That book now out in its 5th edition. Where do you find this information? Online at go.iu.edu/TFRS for the Fundraising School. I'm grateful for my colleagues producing today, Mike Anthony and Jennifer Boffman. I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz, and now you are now more fully informed on this first day from the Fundraising School.